and our sort of theme for this week has been grounding. Our vinyasa class on Thursday was about grounding or earthing. And we had a flow focusing on the Muladhara chakra, the base chakra of the body, and did a lot of movements of sort of bearing down in the earth and feeling a sense of stability through body, through our flow, and was focusing on how necessary it is to do that throughout our lives, throughout particularly periods of change and transformation. To find ways, whether it is your yoga practice or anything else that feels grounding for you, to tune into those practices and lean on them in times of change. And so, in one sense, that is going to be part of our yin today. And I would also like to mesh that in with the theme of resilience, which was the theme of the week in the week that I fell sick. So there was a yin class that was supposed to happen that Sunday when I was unwell that we missed. So there'll be a mesh of the two. So I hope that you are comfortable, and let's begin with some seated meditation. So if you want to just take a moment to sit forward on the pelvic floor, just kind of tilt the hips forward, come right onto the front of the sitting bones. And having done that, to elevate through the spine and start to lead from your solar plexus as you then lift up through the top of the head. And you can let the chin tuck slightly inwards, ever so slightly inwards, as you lengthen over the back or through the back of the neck. And I invite you to roll the shoulders back and down. So you've made a lovely sense of spaciousness through the chest over these small adjustments. That'll help you to breathe more easily, but also to feel comfortable and elevated and awake in your seat, in your meditation seat. And so I invite you to gently close your eyes. Your hands should be on your knees, palms facing up or down. And I invite you to tune into the unforced rhythm of your breath, to become aware of your inhalation and exhalation as it falls naturally, as it is. This is your rhythm, a rhythm and experience only you will ever know, something truly intimate and truly unique, so worthy of our time and attention. So worthy of us returning to it, taking care to know it. So I invite you to let all of your thoughts and ideas and distractions fade into kind of a soup of insignificance as your focus becomes sharp, but not forced, sharp, but not rigid. So alert and curious, but try not to feel as though you're forcing your mind or forcing your brain. Should any distractions arise, smilingly become aware of them, acknowledge them, and then return the mind to the breath, undeterred, with equilibrium. Become fully aware of that cadence of inhalation and exhalation, the subtle rhythm, and use this as a tool in calming your mind and bringing stillness to your body. Allow this stillness to permeate through all layers of your being. Such a special thing in our yin practice that we seek out stillness. We lean into stillness once we find a pose. And in these moments at the beginning and end of the practice. So embrace this stillness. And as we sit here together, I invite you to gently now to move the attention from the nostrils and the breath down to the base of the spine, and to start to root the body down into the earth. So become aware of the contingency between the earth, your floor, your mat, carpet, and your sitting bones and your bum. And feel the pressure, but also the support here. Feel the sturdiness and the steadiness of the earth beneath you. Just become fully aware of how changeable your physical being is, your body is, your life experience, all the cells in your body renewing so often, you renewing, dying, birthing in your experience and identity so many times. And yet there is this subterranean permanence, or experience of permanence, that is the earth beneath us. And so let this contact between body and earth still you further. Let it bring a sense of calming and harmony in mind and body. And fully aware of the support it gives you. Let the earth rise up to meet you as you press down and give in to its support. And perhaps as you focus on this area of the body, you might become aware of warmth or heat, or just kind of like an energetic pulse in the base of the spine in this area. As the attention flows, so energy grows. And just observe this. Feeling that sense of grounding and the activation of your root chakra through this. The center of your sense of survival, your animal instincts, and your sense of community, of humanity. And as we keep the attention on the base of the spine, I invite you to join me in a few rounds of a square breath. So we'll count in for 4 counts, breathing in through the nostrils, through both nostrils. We'll hold for 4 counts. We'll exhale for 4 counts. And we'll hold the breath for 4 counts and then continue. So it's called a square breath. Let's begin. Breathing in through the nostrils. And hold your breath. As you do that, don't force or strain. And let's exhale through the nostrils. Hold the breath. Focus on the third eye. Let's inhale together. Let's hold the breath. And exhale. Hold the breath. Inhale. Retain and soften. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Retain the breath. And exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale, another 2 rounds. Hold the breath. Exhale. Hold. Inhale, last round. Retain the breath and try to relax. Focus on the third eye. Exhale. Retain the breath now for as long as is comfortable to you. And in your own time, when you are ready, slowly releasing that breath and letting the cycle of rhythm return to your rhythm, to your monotonous rhythm. And becoming aware of any lightness in the head, perhaps just feeling a bit more awake, whatever sensations arise, to acknowledge them here. Keeping your eyes closed, and do a few rotations through the neck as we sit here for the last few moments. Nice. To give care to the neck, you can start in whatever direction you like. I started by moving to the left. Make the rotations, try to match the breath. Let your inhalation be a movement up and your exhalation movement down. Let's do 5 rotations in each direction. Movements like this feel like an act of self-care, which is, of course, can well be a process, part of the process of grounding, of recentering yourself, finding your equilibrium, making sure that you equal out rotations in each direction. Matching the breath to the movement. And when you've done 5 rotations in both directions, bring your head to stillness and slowly open up your eyes, enough to move the cushion out from underneath you and to slide your feet forwards so the soles of the feet are facing each other, knees nice and soft. And then I'm going to use 2 cushions and place them in front of your belly, nice and close in towards the torso. If your groins are very tight and hips are very tight, you might want to put a rolled up towel or your blanket or your slop shirt or something under your knees so your groins don't get tired. And then let's recline into this posture in a sort of a counterintuitive way to yoga. So instead of kind of reaching out and extending and flexing, let's roll down into it. So I invite you to look down towards your cushions, towards the seat of the body, bringing your chin to your chest. And from here, imagine as though you could literally now roll yourself up. So continue with that motion, rolling in each vertebra as you start to just fall over and roll in and recline over those cushions. So let it be a rolling down movement rather than a reaching out and forward movement. And then once you're in the pose, just ask yourself if your neck is supported, if your head is supported. If it's not in your cushions or your blankets, a nice option always is to just place your elbows on your legs or on the cushions, and then bring your hands up over your forehead, in front of your forehead, and just cradle your head there. So just make sure that you aren't straining your neck to keep your head aloft. Get that feeling of complete support as you support the weight of your head, the hands or on something soft. I invite you to close your eyes and tune the mind to the breath, and also to that continued contingency between base of spine and bum and seat of body and earth. And so when we were theming a couple of vinyasa classes on resilience, we focused on the physical aspect of this term, which is experienced through what's known as our fascia, which is a kind of a sheath of fluid, of kind of silicon type fluid that it covers our entire body. It is a layer beneath the skin, and it runs and connects muscles and organs, and our nerves and blood vessels run through this fascia. It's the most incredible part of our body, and only more recently studied extensively in Western medicine. And what's so interesting about the fascia is that it doesn't respond to exertion as quickly as muscles do. It seems as though fascia responds more is slower and through pressure, or through quicker, shorter kind of bouncing movements. It has a gelatinous type of substance. And it is thought now that this substance, this fascia that covers the whole of the body from the tip of the head to the toes, is what allows us to bounce back, to recover from injuries, to heal. It brings resilience in our physical form. It is also now we can map the fascia, and you can see how over time injuries, or in fact even stress, whether mental and emotional, is physically embedded in the body. In a map of the fascia, you can see how stress patterns, trauma patterns in the body have been absorbed and changed the physical pattern and map of, or land map of our bodies. And so our fascia becomes is an integral way in which we are physically able to bounce back from trauma and from negative patterns over time. And there's ways that you can access it through movements, and we focused on that aspect of resilience. Resilience in terms of a character, of course, is what we'll focus on a bit more today in our yin practice. And you might sort of groan and roll your eyes at this term and this word. Indeed, in a kind of professional and industrial psychology field, it's a sloppy term now. It can be overused and abused by bosses to tell people to turn up and be productive regardless. It's a word that is superficially slapped into performance reviews and ways in which we are measured in our productivity and success. But the term itself, of course, is much deeper, and that's what we'd like to sort of explore today. And taking last few breaths here in this pose. Last full cycle, perhaps trying to lengthen this last full cycle here. And then on the inhalation, slowly rolling up the same way we came down. So make it that kind of unfurling, rolling movement with the spine. As you slowly come to sit up, you can move the cushions out the way, and we will move the feet in close to the seat of the body, coming into our Baddha Konasana. So you hook your fingers around the feet and reach up through the top of the head. Let the arms be relaxed and let them lengthen as you lift up through the very top of the body, through the top of the head, and feel the stretch over the back of the shoulders. Make sure that you're still sitting on the very front of the pelvic floor, of the seat of the body, and so that you aren't kind of slumping backwards in the lower back and the lumbar spine. And then just relax your knees, relax the groins, and feel the rise and fall of the belly as you press the bum into the earth. A few breaths here. And so as we hold this pose, we can actually move into a kind of movement that works with the fascia. So this movement, the bouncing butterfly movement, is a way that we access fascia. So it's not accessed through um, using weights or movements with a lot of muscular force, but it's more these kind of repetitive bounce back ability movements. So we can access the fascia through a few cycles of breath doing this. And I invite you now to stop and to really press your knees into the floor as you lean forward with the chin and bring your elbows onto your thighs or the calves. And now we'll hold for a whole minute here as we move through these two layers of the fascia, the superficial and the deep. And the superficial is accessed through those kind of bouncing movements. And you can loosen up the fascia. And the deep fascia is accessed through deep holding movements like this. And so a lot of our yin practice, without even acknowledging it or saying so or focusing on it, does access the deep fascia. It's very healing for it. And so just allow yourself to lean forward, releasing any kind of stasis or tension you might have around the hips here and the base of the body. This is also very healing for the sciatica. So a lot of people experience pain in the lower back or down the side of the legs, sciatic nerve impingement. And this is a great posture to release that. And the term resilience, its definition is the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. Resilience is elasticity. And the second meaning of this term is our capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Resilience is our toughness, our hardiness. Coming into the last few seconds of this hold, using the exhalation to go deeper into the pose. And when you're ready, inhale to lift up and release. And you can place your hands behind your hips and let your knees come up together. Have your feet about hip width apart in front of the body. And you can just windscreen wipe from side to side. Just going at your own time. And I invite you, the next instance that you bring the knees to the floor, it doesn't matter which direction you had them, left or right. I invite you to then take the opposing arm from the direction that your knees are going over and to look to the back of your mat. So you're coming into kind of like a half reclining twist. And I invite you to take a cushion and place it between your hands. And then slowly lower the chest. And if you can, your elbows onto the floor as well, bringing your chest onto the cushion. Now, the more stiff you are in your lower spine and over the hips, so the less of a twist you are doing here, the more height you might need with the cushions. So if you feel like you can't get onto your elbows and you're not supported under the torso, then put another cushion underneath you. And then soften your head. And I invite you to counter resist your top hip away from your shoulders and head without straining or thinking too much about it. And gently press the side of the hip that is floor facing downwards. You can close your eyes in that hold. In this hold, So the study of resilience in Western psychology is actually a fairly new aspect or school of study. And it has posed quite an interesting challenge for Western empirical study, because it cannot be tested, right? It cannot run a psychological test or interview to discover one's resilience. It is only discovered through how one's life unfolds. And the study of individuals has to be done, of course, over time, over quite a long period of time. And what is also interesting is that if you don't experience adversity in life, you don't know how resilient you are. Kind of like our fascia, resilience emerges and comes alive under stress. Resilience poses the question, do you succumb or do you surmount? Coming into last 2 cycles of breath here on this side. On your next inhalation, you can press your elbows into the floor or onto your cushions and come up to face the front of the mat again. And let's go over to the other side, bringing your knees in the opposite direction and sweeping around to face the back of the mat again. Cushions where they were before, placing your arms on either side of them and coming to soften your body to be supported. And then I invite you to activate that slight sense of resistance, counter resistance, with the top hip pressing backwards away from your shoulders, and then that slight sense of earthing, pressing down into the floor. And so in Western psychology, the kind of guru of resilience is a gentleman named Norman Gomez. He studied at the University of Minnesota. He was a developmental psychologist and clinical psychologist. And one of the first, and I guess quite obvious things that he studied and revealed was that people react to stress, trauma, and difficulty in very different ways. It is not easy to place resilience and types of resilience and levels of resilience into boxes, into clear categories. This is a very diverse set of ways that people are able to react and do react, even within their own lives, not just amongst people in a group, in a study group. What Norman Gomez did for most of his professional life when he was focusing on resilience was to study children and the progression of children to adults. He studied them over sort of 2 to 3 decades. And he would divide the group of children in his study between those who had risk, they were at risk, so they faced a great amount of stress and trauma and difficulty, and those that did not, of course. And of that group that were at risk, what was, of course, most interesting to him was the percentage of that group that, in spite of trauma and difficulty and hardship, grew up to be stable and successful adults. In his study, about a third of that group display this resilience, to not succumb to what seems to be a destined path of difficulty, of ruin, of continued experiences of stress. What we found is that there were certain patterns of challenges over someone's life and tipping points where the energy and the will to overcome peaks and changes then the pattern. Coming into the last few breaths here. Your next inhalation, pressing the floor away, lifting your chest up, coming to face the front of your mat once again. You can move your cushions just to the side, and we're going to recline from here. So make sure that you have your books or your blocks nearby as you slowly roll back onto your mat. Keeping your knees pressing up, your knees bent towards the ceiling. Your feet are hip width apart. I invite you to press your feet into the floor. Just lift your hips enough to place the yoga block or the nice big fat book underneath the base of your spine. So just take a moment to place it carefully, and it should be really over that very the tail, the tailbone, where essentially the tail, in the coccyx, where our tailbone would grow out of. And then relax your hands. You can have them on either side of your body, palms facing upwards, if that feels good. Or you can lift them up to frame your face. So in what's called sort of cactus arms, elbows at shoulder height and arms bent. So like a frame for your face. And I invite you to close your eyes. You just tune into the rise and fall of your belly, but also the feeling of pressure between tailbone and block or book. And I invite you to gently press into the block or book. So to bear down. And so, of course, through these studies and the subsequent studies from Gomesi's students, there are a few important themes to draw out. The one is that those who were able to overcome their at-risk circumstances tended to meet the world on their own terms, meaning that they had an internal locus of control. These children believed that they and not their circumstances affected their achievements. So in other words, they saw themselves in a very deep way, both consciously but also subconsciously, in the way in which they reacted to circumstances and conducted their lives. They saw and experienced themselves as the orchestrators of their own fate. Interestingly, the study showed, having said that resilience is not, and your resilience associated to the deep belief that you are the orchestrator of your being, the study showed that this belief and the associated resilience is not indestructible, of course, and that there is a balancing scale between stresses and resilience. So, notwithstanding deeply believing that one is the orchestrator of one's own life and fate, everyone had a breaking point. Everyone does have a breaking point. And so part of our emotional intelligence and part of our knowing of ourselves and our life path in building resilience is to know what our breaking points are, where we are able to bounce back. And for everybody it's different, but where we are not. And acknowledging those limitations. And so it's like a dance between fully believing and knowing that one is an autonomous being, able to change and pivot, but also acknowledging and knowing where one does have vulnerabilities, where one is vulnerable. And this leads to another distinction between reacting in a way, reciprocating to life circumstances in a way that's very active and reactive, and one when the circumstances are at one's breaking points or vulnerable areas, that one doesn't react but rather softens, knowing when you act in response and knowing when one has to turn inwards and rest and reflect. And for everybody, that's different. The last few breaths in this pose, if you would like to, I invite you to gently lift your legs up and to bring your feet together, knees apart, and to just reach forwards to your shins, or if you can get to your ankles, but somewhere around just below the knees, and then draw the legs in towards the seat of the body and down. So almost, so it's like our Baddha Konasana configuration with the legs that we had at the start of the practice, but now in a bridge pose. To continue with that steady rhythmical breath and with a bearing down into the earth. Of course, if you can't reach your feet, you can also loop a scarf or a strap or a tie around the feet. Last 2 full cycles of breath here. Then slowly release your feet. Bring them back to the floor, hip width apart. And I invite you to place your hands on either side of the body and to gently and slowly, with full attention on the base of the spine and all the what could be quite intense sensations you will feel now, focusing on that area, lift the hips slowly. And I invite you to slide the blocks out the way and then to slowly lift your hips so that your back is at a straight line. So we don't need to go into a back bend, just a nice straight line. And then let's slowly lower the hips onto the floor, feeling each vertebra in this movement. So the movement is super, super slow. Feeling each vertebra as you lower the hips onto the mat, perhaps feeling quite intense sensations as you lower the coccyx onto the mat and feel the earth and the touch of the earth on the coccyx. And then press your bum into the floor and let's inhale and lift up again a second time, vertebra by vertebra, rolling up, rounding in the spine and then coming to straighten the spine. And with the exhalation, let's slowly lower down, vertebra by vertebra, rounding into the spine and slowly lowering the hips. Pressing the bum to the floor at the bottom of the exhalation, and 1/3 and last time, let's inhale and lift up. Lifting the hips and using the exhalation to slowly roll down, vertebra by vertebra, feeling the touch of the earth beneath the base of the spine. And then with the inhalation, lift both knees up and hug your knees to your chest. You can rock from side to side. Coming to bring the body to stillness and hold on to one of your knees and rock up to a seated position. Move your feet out to one side. We're going to come up into our tabletop. So stack your joints up, hands under knees, hips over, hands under knees. Wow, not that kind of shape. Hands under shoulders, knees under hips. And with your breath, I invite you to take an inhalation to arch the spine, often the chest forward, soften the belly, and exhale, let's round in. So we're going to flow through some cat-cows, and we're going to, as we do that, focus on the base of the spine. So let's tune our cat-cows to our theme of grounding and to our focus on the Muladhara chakra. So feel as though the base of the spine and the bum and the hips are moving your cat-cow. So maybe the linear up and down does not apply here. Perhaps you're moving backwards a little bit. Maybe you're moving off to the side. Whatever feels good and right and natural, and just using the inhalation for the arch and the exhalation for the rounding in. We can just flow through another 5 cycles in your own time, in your own rhythm, feeling as though the hips and base of the spine is leading us in this cat-cow, in this flow of body and breath. Coming into the last 2 cycles of breath. Bringing the spine back to neutral. We're going to do a similar thing, but with difference. So keeping your alignment where it is, I invite you to lift your toes up, your feet up, maybe interlock your feet behind you. And with the inhalation, let your hips come forwards and soften as you soften your chest and look up. And then as you exhale, I invite you to press backwards. And inhale, coming forward. So let's make the movements nice and slow and soft and steady, so we don't kind of overstimulate the mind and lose the lovely mental effect of our yin class. Make them rhythmical. Inhale, coming forwards. Exhale, moving back. Inhale, coming forwards. Exhale, moving back. Another 2 times. Inhale, coming forwards. Exhale, moving back. And the last time here, inhale, coming forwards. And exhale, sliding back. And this time you can stay here in our child pose, which is one of the king poses of yin. So let's bring a cushion in nice and close to the belly. Make sure that your head is supported by something, whether it's your hands or another cushion or a blanket or a block covered in something soft. And then you can reach your hands out forwards. Make sure your knees are nice and wide. So we'll make it really an extended child pose with a wide straddle. And this will help you press the bum backwards and then press it downwards into your heels and into the earth. So in activating the Muladhara chakra. And close your eyes. And so one of the other crucial aspects that was discovered in this long study was perspective. So the narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves and how we interpret things that happen in our lives and happen to us are absolutely critical in our level of and consistency in level of resilience. In fact, somebody who studied this a little later than Garmetsi, a certain person by the name of George Bonanno, coined a term in relation to this, which was PTE, a potentially traumatic event. And of course, what that really means is that seeing things in certain ways very directly results and influences how we are able to respond to them. So when we experience trauma and difficulty in life, and we all do at certain times, seeing meaning or potential in the challenge, change, trauma is absolutely critical. And so one always has a choice in how one perceives what happens to us. Of course, it's very glib to say this from a perspective of not going through great challenges. Seems very glib to write about this in a clinical study and so on. When you are in the darkness and you are in the well of trauma, seeing meaning in it can sometimes be the most difficult thing, of course. Suffering seems so meaningless, so unnecessary. But ultimately, we human beings are stories. Our identity is but a sum of stories. And stories are malleable. Stories are creative and created, and they are fundamental to our human existence, how we understand reality, and how we move through life. We are authoring life all the time. We are authoring ourselves and how we are able to respond to our environment all the time through the narrative we have created about ourselves. And so what they found is that people who were able to see meaning in many things, in circumstances that maybe weren't particularly dire, where it's easy to think rationally and carefully, that seeing of meaning and potential becomes a mind habit pattern. So when one is in the darkest well of despair, there is an almost automated response and willingness of the mind and the heart to see meaning, to see potential, to see opportunity in change, to see lessons in trauma. And so let us observe the stories we tell ourselves. And in the good times, in the times of rationality and strength, normality, let us carefully alter our stories so that when we face challenges, we are more able to respond positively. On your next inhalation, I invite you to roll up. And slide your hands back behind you. I'm running out of space behind me. Slide your hands back behind you and lift your hips up if that feels nice, to soften your neck and back. If it's too intense for your back to lift your hips up, you can just look backwards and hang on the shoulders and elbows. So wherever you are, let's take 3 deep cycles of breath here, breathing in fully, opening the chest, feeling a great sense of opportunity for energizing the body in these breaths. And then slowly lowering the hips and moving the cushion, if you had one, out the way so that you have a clear bit of space in front of you, but have it nearby. And from here, you'll just bring your hands forwards again. And we're going to set up for a low hold Anjanasana. So you're going to bring your right foot forwards between your hands and then soften your hips. So you really want to relax your glutes, and it's feel totally different to, say, in a vinyasa class where we're trying to lift from here and make it active. And totally relax your glutes, relax your hips, and let gravity do the work here to allow you to slide more comfortably and deeply into the pose. You're going to keep your hands on either side of that front foot, and you're going to look down towards your toes. So the neck is soft and long. You're not kind of straining to look up or arch the back. Just enjoying that hip opener, and again, lower spine activation. Keeping mind on breath. I invite you on the next exhalation to place your left hand nice and firmly on the floor on the inside of that right foot, and gently press the right leg away from you as you kind of telescope your ribs up towards, or your chest up towards the ceiling. So it's a melting pose. It shouldn't feel effortful. It should feel very soft and nice, and a lovely way to relax tension in the lower back and sciatic nerve. As you press the knee away, make the belly soft. Really soften deeply into the glutes. Last breath here. And then inhale to draw the knee in towards you. And we'll come into that lovely half pigeon. So bringing your knee between your hands, pose we all know. And you're going to take a cushion if you need it and place it underneath your bum cheek on the right side, so you aren't falling over towards the right. And then taking another cushion or blanket and placing it in front of you as you fold forwards. And soften your head. Make sure your head is supported. And remember that the closer your foot, your right foot, is to your left shoulder, so the more you move it away from the hips, the more intense the stretch in your right hip is going to be. And the closer that foot is towards the back of the mat, the less intense. So a further critical aspect in resilience, and those who seem to have resilience and those who seem to build it over life, over time, those who surmount rather than succumb, is resourcefulness. Resourcefulness requires of us a certain type of thinking, a certain type of lateral thinking. When the carpet is pulled from underneath you, when all potential, or what should I say, when all known tools and objects and ideas and aspects and habits that we might be used to are not there, how does one make a plan and make do? requires creativity. It requires of us to see things in a sense of potential and in a new light. Resourcefulness is also a sense of a deep knowing, comes from a sense of deep knowing that there is an opportunity to find the desired end and to find the way out if one just navigates correctly and pivots correctly on the path. So it seems as though resourceful people and resourcefulness in relation to resilience is related to people with very strong, a set and strong sense of where they want to go and the outcome they want to achieve or place in their heart or their mind or their life that they seek to be. Not losing sense of the ultimate point in direction leads one to be resourceful, enables one to be resourceful, helps one to find the path when the peak of the mountain is always in sight. So the work that one knows one has to do, but sometimes puts aside, the work in defining your goals, defining what you want out of your life and how you want to live, are so important, particularly for the times when you meet challenges, when things don't work out as planned, when you face stress and trauma. They become beacons in navigating, and they become a source of or a trajectory for resourcefulness, making a plan, finding the back road when the main highway is closed off. It's an internal compass, a navigation tool. Another 2 cycles of breath in our half pigeon pose. Maybe pressing the hips into the floor. And then inhale to lift your chest up enough to bring your hands onto the mat. And we can just move that cushion that was on the side of the hips out the way and front out the way, just enough to make space for your left foot to come forwards. Bringing your left knee over the right. So your knees are stacked up one on top of each other. If they're not in a nice straight line, it doesn't matter. If this feels super uncomfortable for your hips, you can also just go into a normal seated position, Sukhasana seat. And then from here, I invite you to bring your hands forward over your knees and try to bring your elbows on the floor. If your elbows don't meet the floor, you have your props, so the blocks, the cushions, whatever you need to place underneath the arms. Palms are facing up towards the ceiling. And then soften your neck and bring your chin to softly balance on the front edge of your left knee. So it should feel very nice and relieving for your neck and your back. And you can always use a cushion in front under the belly on top of your left hip as well. If you can't bring your chin to the knee, if you can't get to the floor, bridge the gap with the cushions and the blankets. I guess yin in that practice, that way, is a practice in resourcefulness. So if the pose isn't accessible, find whatever props you have at home to make it work. Into another 2 or 3 full breaths here, folding forwards and gently pressing the legs into each other, gently pressing the bum into the floor. And then I invite you to sit up and draw that left leg back and behind once again. Place your hands on either side of that front right knee. Tuck the left toes underneath, and you can step back if it feels nice to you into a down dog. Don't worry about your form or how you look. You can just kind of pedal with your feet and soften your neck. If this feels too intense for you, then go onto your knees. Go into the tabletop and hands and knees. Maybe taking 3 deep breaths here in this nice soft down dog. Make sure your neck is long. You can move and groove your body as feels right and good. And then when you're ready, you can come back onto your knees and then bring your left foot forward between your hands. Or you can do it in one smooth movement, bringing your left foot between your hands, up to you. So first, a few breaths here. It was about 10 breaths on the other side as we soften our hips, soften the glutes, and keep your hands on the floor on either side of that front foot. Look down towards your toes, so make sure your neck is not straining. Nice straight line with the spine. And focus on the deep breathing and the release in the body through the exhalation, as you let gravity help you to open the hips, coaxing the hips forwards and downwards. On your next exhalation, bringing your right hand flat on the floor and gently pushing your left knee away with your left hand. As your weight comes more deeply into the outer blade of the left foot and onto the back, the outer kind of edge of your right leg. And you can telescope your ribs up towards the ceiling. You can look up to the ceiling as well if that feels right, or if that you feel you're straining to do that, you can just look down to the floor. Feeling is soft. All these movements very releasing for the very lower part of the spine, the hips and sciatic nerve. Your next inhalation, draw that knee up towards you, back to the center, and let's find our Kapotasana, our Ardha Kapotasana on the side, the half Kapotasana, and stack yourself up in the way that you did on the other side for nice balance. And when you are ready and you've found your edge in terms of the angle of your left foot, soften down and close your eyes. Make sure your head is supported. The luminary and poet Ursula K. Le Guin, I think that's how you say it, wrote a line that goes, "All you have is what you are, and what you are, you give." And this speaks to the last aspect and theme that one can draw through this long and immense study on resilience and children transitioning into adults and their ability to respond and overcome challenges and traumas. And this last aspect is giving. So interestingly, those who displayed a lot of resilience were incredibly generous, both in times of stability in life and in times of struggle. There was a strong pattern of generosity of spirit, and generosity of resources. I think we all know and feel deep within us through experience that when we give of ourselves, when we are generous, we know that there is a kind of reciprocal exchange, this energetic exchange that happens. The more space we make in our hearts to give, the more we tend to receive. This is not to say that we should ever seek to give for the receiving, but I think we all know and have felt and experienced this almost karmic exchange. And we also, I think, intrinsically know and have experienced that the more we practice generosity, the more capacity for it we have. The more we give, the more perspective on what we are able to give shifts and expands. It almost seems like a tremendous kind of feat of physics. And that the more we give, the more we have to give. And this giving seems to be a great source of resilience, of capacity to pivot, of capacity to overcome. And people with great resilience seem to always give of themselves and what they have, regardless of how little they may have, or how difficult, or how spent or spare they may feel. And it seems as though this is kind of related to another intimate knowledge we have about opposites, that in life we come to know, have our most intimate knowledge of things through their opposite. That presence is most sharply contoured by the negative space of absence. That busyness reveals the values of stillness. That loss reveals the magnitude of love. In the same way, the less you have, the less capacity you have through giving in those circumstances. So you seem to have more to give. And so you seem to receive more and grow more and become more resilient. And the lesson of this is that if you want to feel abundance and strength in life, if you want to receive from life, you must give. In your next inhalation, I invite you to lift your chest up and push the floor away. To move the cushions out the way. We come towards the close of our practice, moving the right leg over the left. Bringing both knees, stacking both knees up on top of each other. And exhale as you bring your chest over your legs. Using cushions or blocks if you need to under your chest and under your arms. Palms facing up towards the ceiling. And if you can, soften your chin over the front edge of your right knee. Perhaps it's on a cushion. Just a few breaths here before we recline into our Shavasana. Taking a last full exhalation. And then inhale to lift your chest up. And from here, place your hands behind you enough to release your legs. And then slowly roll back and down onto your mat, grabbing a blanket or something warm or whatever feels right for you in your Shavasana, placing a cushion under your knees, perhaps in your lower back, wherever you need it. Once you are fully reclined in your Shavasana, taking a moment to check that your knees are hip width apart, with your feet flopping outwards, and that your hands and arms are away from the body, with the palms facing upwards. Try to occupy space in your Shavasana. Don't restrict yourself and squash your body. Allow yourself to feel expansive. Give space for the relaxation. And I invite you to close your eyes now, focusing once again on the silent and private and internal relationship between mind and breath. Using this rhythm of breath to slide into and fall into a state of deep waking relaxation. And as you lie here, I invite you to take a moment to feel underneath your body each point at which your body meets the earth, from the heels to the calves, to the thighs, the buttocks, the middle and upper back, the back of the arms and elbows, back of the forearms and hands, the shoulders, the back of the head. Just scanning the body for those areas of contingency, and I invite you to feel this steady support, to know that you are supported. To allow the earth to rise up to meet you, and through this let go and sink back and in to the cradle of the earth. Allow yourself to be cradled. Through the changing processes of body and emotions and minds and the life that we live, in flux, ground yourself. Find your center, your compass, through the forgiving embrace of the earth. As you let go and sink into the earth, return to your center. Find your stability, a deep calm, the deep knowing. And from this arises the capacity for resilience. Invite you to gently start to move your hands and feet. It's running your thumb over your tips of your fingers. Perhaps taking a moment to move your tongue over your teeth and the interior of your mouth. And when you're ready, taking a lovely deep inhalation and stretching your arms above your head. And in your own time, in a way that feels good and right for you, come up to a seated position facing forwards. And before we conclude our session with a universal vibration of together, I'd like to read a short poem to you called The Weighing by Jane Hirschfield. It goes, the heart's reasons seem clearly, even the hardest will carry its whip marks and sadness and must be forgiven. As the drought-starved eland forgives the drought-starved lion who finally takes her, enters willingly then the life she cannot refuse, and his lion is fed and does not remember the other. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it, and then it asks more, and we give it. Bring your hands together in Jali Mudra, taking a deep breath in. Thank you for joining me this evening.